growing.
Okay. So you're thinking about planting again, right?
Yeah.
So what stirred that for you?
I think for me, it's kind of like I'm always wanting to do that. I think it's how I'm wired. I'm always, I have like I would say an apostolic calling where I'm called to start up churches, plant, raise up leadership, and blow out of town. And so for me, it was odd for me not to plant for the last few years. So it was kind of the reverse. And I felt like I had a specific burden from the Lord not to plant. But what happens is when I'm getting ready to plant again, something awakens. And it's kind of like suddenly, I'm going to say it's totally supernatural. I'm totally unaware of it.
You don't prompt it, you don't force it.
I'll be in a taco shop. I was with a bunch of planners that we were training under Multiply.
Yeah.
And we did Train the Trainer. And we all went to lunch afterwards to debrief. And the guy behind the counter at this taco shop, it's kind of a popular taco shop here, he kept coming to the table and wanted to talk. And we're telling him about Jesus. And when he left, everybody said, "What just happened?" And I said, "That's apostolic gifting at work."
Wow.
It doesn't matter where you are. And I can feel it switch on where I'm not doing it. I'm not trying. I wasn't starting now to lead people to Jesus. It's just happening around me.
Yes.
And I'm conscious of the Holy Spirit at work, because I would say I'm a terrible evangelist, but it's part of the gifting that starts happening. And then the other thing, I call it the quickening, where core team members suddenly are dropping in, and I'm going boom, 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 and it's supernatural. I'm not building a team. God is building a team around me, and He's building connections for the gospel around me.
You're getting in on what God's doing.
Yeah, it's timing.
I mean, you work with a lot of church planters. I do too. What are some of the mistakes you see planters making when they're putting together a team?
Well, the first thing that they're doing is they're looking for people that are going to be underlings, right? They're looking for people to do the chores that the church entity is going to need, rather than doing what I saw you model in your own leadership, which is I'm going to grab people and I'm going to seek to empower them in their gifts.
Yes.
Knowing that a sovereign God has strategically placed a cross-section of people in my midst, and when I figure out what the strategy the Holy Spirit has, then I'll know what we're supposed to do. Because to me, it's gift-driven leadership often. What I'm apostolically responsible for is noticing what gifts has the Holy Spirit put in this group of people. And that's going to change the direction that we're going to go.
We do the opposite a lot. We go, okay, here's the positions I need. Now I'm going to go try to force people into those positions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like when I planted in the inner city in Long Beach, we were on the edge of the Rainbow District. There was arts there. Cherry Boulevard and 7th Street is kind of like the dividing line. There's like the rich on one side, and there's the very violent. In fact, Cherry, we had people say, if you just planted on that side of that street, that'd be great. So it was very unique. But what happened was we had an art professor, a bunch of art students, and a professional artist all on my core team. So, I'm thinking, oh, great, we're going to reach the art district. So I got them together and I said, hey guys, we're going to reach the art community because you're here and I can see what the Holy Spirit's doing. Yeah. And they went, okay. And it's kind of like Will Mancini, your kingdom concept. Yeah. The apostolic esprit wasn't there. The local predicament matched it. The collective potential was there. Yeah. But they said, Peyton, we don't really want to reach we do that. That's when we live, just being Christians and witnesses. We're doing that every day. But they said, but this neighborhood, there's homeless people. And there's a lot of down and outs, and there's mothers getting their kids ripped away from them by Child Protective Services. And there's prostitutes on the... Peyton, we want to go after the marginalized.
Wow.
And that's what they were passionate. They said, if you would allow us to do that, we would use our artistic skill to do that. But we don't want to go after the art people. Right. We want to go after the brokenness in this city. And when we did that completely changed their trajectory. And so I realized at that time, what you have to do is you can't just look at people's abilities.
Yeah.
You have to look at their passions, because their passions will point you to their gifting. And so when I found their passion, I found their gift. The gifts were the gift of compassion, the gift of giving, the gift of helps. I found spiritual gifts linked to passion. And that was a game changer for me.
I think a lot of times when we're building a team, we do a lot of talking, we don't do a lot of listening. And if we would just listen to our people and begin to identify what is their passion, what are their gifts, what are their strengths, what are their abilities, and begin to look at that from God's perspective and recognize this is who God's wired them to be. And my job as a leader is to steward that.
So true.
And if we would get back to, I don't know, I'd be curious about what you think about this. I think we need to get back to talking more to our team and our leaders about their God-given calling.
Yes.
I hear the talk about calling around with pastors, but I don't hear it with lay people and lay leaders.
Right.
I don't know why we're not talking about that anymore, but it's important.
Well, because calling implies that people have more freedom than what we often want to give them. Because if I talk about your gift, I'm still channeling that into my structure. Yeah. How does your gift fit my thing? Yeah. When I talk about calling, I'm releasing you now. I'm saying, brother, what's your calling? Yeah. That may be outside these four walls. And that's scary to a leader that wants to control. But for a leader who wants to empower, talking about calling, that's a whole different conversation.
And here's what I've discovered. When you empower your leaders, when you empower your team, their gifts are released, but their commitment level goes up and their loyalty goes up, because they're going, wow, this guy understands who I am and he's helping maximize who I am. And people want to be around that.
That's so true. Yeah. It's ownership, because now you're saying, I'm discipling you as a leader into a leader. Yeah. For me, like planting, for me became about, how do I get out of here quickly? You know, if I have a calling, I use that word apostolically very loosely, that it just means I plant and move on. Yeah. You know, it's multiplication thinking. So when I go in, the first thought I'm thinking is, how do I make everybody here able to carry this on their own? Yeah. Because I'm not staying.
Lead as if you're not going to be there.
Correct.
That's huge. Even if you're going to be there long term, we should lead as if we're not going to be there.
I tell them when I come in, because I don't want anyone dependent on me. I say, I'm only here for a short term. Yes. You don't want me here for a long term. My gifts have a sell-by date. They're really cool at the beginning, like what I described. Those are really cool. But the longer I stay, the more those wane again, because I'm not wired to stay. I'm wired to move on. So for me, I would be more like a catalyst. That would be the effect of my leadership. It would stir up gifts. It would help people discover. It would empower. It would deploy. It would mobilize. And then it's time for me to go. And I think part of the key of my ministry was discovering that that's who I was. That I used to think I had like attachment issues with churches, because after things were going really well, it'd be time for me to move on. And that's hard. But once I understood that there's not something broken to me. It's not like, why can't you just stay put? It was more that, no, this is who I'm called to be. And then when you mentioned that calling, I was free. I understood now. And that allowed me to suddenly empower a bunch of other people.
That's good, because I think a lot of times leaders, pastors, church planters, they're looking at themselves through a certain grid, that, I have to fit this grid.
Right.
And they fail to see themselves. And I think when we understand our own leadership and we maximize our own leadership, we're better at leading those around us when we truly understand the type of leader we are and the style we have.
Yeah. You were actually the first leader to actually say, I remember in our interview, you said, do you have a disc profile? Do you have a strength finder? I'd never even heard of these things. I had just started to hear people talking about them, and that was empowering for me, that someone actually said, what kind of leader are you? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, Peyton, how did you help people discover their callings, their gifts?
So, when I was in high school, I took these tests that showed me like what my career was going to be. Yeah. And I got 1 out of 2
be
right.
A comic book artist. Right?
Now that would be great. I want to be a cartoonist, but my results came back, and I was either going to go into healthcare, which I did end up becoming in our end, so 1 out of 2 ain't bad, or, and I'm not making this up, a chicken farmer. And there's a big market for that in California.
I can see you being a
chicken farmer. You know, I live in my head a lot, so you know, I'd be up there, you know, Napoleon Dynamite. But the funny thing is that, you know, when I think a lot of the spiritual gift tests that we find online are a lot like that. They can so mislead people,
right? Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to things that people might be able to do, but not passionate about. So when we went into Long Beach, I knew that a lot of the people coming into Long Beach, it's a scary world in the inner city. And I knew that I'm going to lose all of these people. Like, we had everything from a knife fight in church to pit bulls biting people to people making change out of our offering, cars broken into in the parking lot. One of our members baptized and then shot in the back by police a few weeks later. I mean, it was pretty intense. And since then, we've baptized people from MS-13. I mean, you name it. You know, that church it's a inner city church plant, and it has all of the things that come with that. But when we had the core team, I threw a bunch of newspapers down on the table. We sat them in groups, little round circle tables with maybe 6 to 7 people per table. And I threw local papers, Long Beach papers, down on the table. And the exercise that we did, because I want to get to those passions, I would say, circle all the needs. So we started with the needs, and they'd circle that with a black Sharpie.
Wow.
And then I would say, right, okay, now, obviously, we're one little church plant. We're not going to be, you've circled hundreds of needs. I'd hear back from the groups. What did you hear? Then I would give them a red Sharpie. And then I would say, I want you to circle 1, maybe 2 needs that you would say, if we could do something about this. Yeah. If we could pick a fight, I would always call it picking a fight, you know, with something wrong. And so if I could pick a fight with one thing, I'd pick a fight with this. And then what I would do is I would just ask each person to stand up and share about what they circled and read. And I'm telling you, Mac, like, they would stand up and people would be crying. And there would be these pleas to me, like, please, Peyton, don't. And I'm like, that's it. That's their passion. Because people, they're only going to circle things that I asked them that we're going to do something about. Yeah. So there was this ownership that they were willing to take. And I was looking for that. So I was looking for a burden first, really. Yeah. Whether they burden, because once you find people's burdens, you find their passions. Once you find their passions, that's how the Holy Spirit has divinely gifted them to answer that burden, to operate in that passion, to meet that need in that city.
That's so good.